Can you believe it? A vertical city that welcomed 111 million visitors in 2024 is now being whispered about as a future ghost mall, quietly losing its soul beneath the glitter. 3 times the population of California walked through Dubai Mall in a single year. That's not traffic. That's a controlled human migration into a machine. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The louder the crowds become, the quieter the warning signs grow. Because collapse doesn't always begin with emptiness. Sometimes it begins at the peak. To understand what's happening, we have to rewind to a time when this wasn't a mall. It was an impossible idea planted in sand and ambition. Back in 1997, when Dubai was still dismissed as a desert outpost, a different vision was forming. Not a shopping center, but a self-contained universe of consumption. This wasn't about retail. It was about control. Climate control, experience control, even emotional control. A place where reality could be rewritten through architecture, luxury, and scale. The ambition wasn't small. It was borderline absurd. Billions of dollars poured into a project that aimed to bend geography, climate, and human behavior into one unified experience. Imagine building a structure so massive it rivals the GDP of smaller nations. Not metaphorically, literally. That's the scale of belief behind this project. Placed beside the tallest tower on Earth, Burj Khalifa, this wasn't coincidence. It was a message. If you want to see the future, you come here. But building in the desert isn't just expensive, it's hostile. Temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius turned construction into a battlefield against nature itself. Engineers had to invent solutions that didn't exist. Cooling systems, specialized materials, constant maintenance. This wasn't construction. It was environmental warfare disguised as development. And then, just as the structure was rising, the world collapsed. In 2008, the global financial crisis froze liquidity overnight. Dubai's real estate market didn't just slow down. It imploded with terrifying speed. Transactions dropped from billions monthly to almost nothing. Investors vanished. Confidence evaporated. The dream was suddenly standing on a financial cliff edge, and yet in the middle of this chaos, the mall opened. An aquarium filled with millions of liters of water. An ice rink in the desert. Luxury brands shining brighter than ever. It looked insane to outsiders. It was like hosting a grand celebration on a sinking ship. Beautiful, bold, and dangerously defiant. But beneath the surface, there was a calculated strategy. Luxury wasn't just decoration, it was psychological warfare, a signal to the world that Dubai wasn't collapsing. It was rising stronger than ever, and somehow it worked. Occupancy stayed high. Visitors came, confidence returned. What looked like madness slowly transformed into dominance. By 2011, the mall wasn't just surviving, it was outperforming entire cities. More visitors than New York City. Let that sink in. A single building attracting more people than one of the greatest urban centers in human history. This wasn't retail anymore. This was pilgrimage. By 2015, nearly 100 million people were visiting annually. Every week, over 1 million people entered this artificial ecosystem designed to maximize spending, emotion, and experience. Luxury brands didn't just open stores here, they fought for space. Because this wasn't just a mall, it was the gateway to wealth, influence, and global visibility in the Middle East. Expansion followed expansion. Fashion Avenue became a fortress of ultra-luxury, concentrating the world's most powerful brands into one controlled environment. At its peak, Dubai Mall wasn't competing with malls. It was competing with entire countries for attention. But every system that grows this fast carries hidden pressure. Because what looks like strength on the surface often hides fragility underneath. By 2019, something subtle began to change. Growth slowed. Not dramatically, not enough to panic, but enough to signal that the system was reaching its limits. The mall had become too big to grow naturally. And when growth stops, pressure begins. Behind the lights, a massive machine was running non-stop to keep the illusion alive. Cooling systems stretched across kilometers. Energy consumption levels far beyond global averages. A constant battle against the desert just to maintain comfort. This wasn't sustainability, it was survival. Every square meter demanded power. Every visitor added strain. Every luxury experience came with an invisible environmental cost. And the system was aging. Pipes, cooling units, infrastructure, all under relentless pressure. Maintenance cost rising, complexity increasing, risks multiplying silently beneath the surface. But the real cracks weren't physical, they were economic. At 98.5% occupancy, the mall looked perfect. But perfection can be dangerous, because it leaves no room for change. New brands couldn't enter. Old brands wouldn't leave. Innovation slowed. Creativity suffocated. The market wasn't growing anymore. It was frozen. At the same time, prices surged. Rents climbed to extreme levels. Only the biggest players could survive. Smaller, innovative brands were pushed out completely. This wasn't a marketplace anymore. It was a locked ecosystem. And then came another shift. Parking, once free, became monetized. It seems small, but psychologically, it changes everything. When people start paying just to enter a space, their relationship with that space changes. It stops being a community. It becomes a transaction. And transactions don't build loyalty. They build resistance. While all of this was happening, something even bigger was shifting outside Dubai. Saudi Arabia launched massive projects under Vision 2030. New cities, new malls, new opportunities. For the first time, Dubai wasn't the only option. Capital began to shift. Attention began to divide. Competition became real. And then came the most powerful force of all: time. A new generation entered the market with completely different values. Generation Z doesn't think like previous consumers. They question everything, especially luxury. They still want status, but they want meaning too. And that's where Dubai Mall faces its biggest problem. Because extreme luxury and sustainability don't naturally coexist. A place built on excess struggles to convince a generation that values balance. Energy consumption, environmental impact, perceived waste. These aren't hidden anymore. They're visible and they matter. To many young consumers, Dubai Mall doesn't represent aspiration. It represents contradiction. And that contradiction is dangerous because perception shapes demand and demand shapes survival. In response, expansion plans continue. More stores, more luxury, more space. But expansion in a saturated system doesn't solve problems. It amplifies them. Because the real challenge isn't size anymore, it's relevance. Dubai Mall is no longer competing on scale. It's competing on identity. Is it a symbol of the future or a monument of the past? Because what worked in 2010 doesn't necessarily work in 2030. Consumer behavior is shifting toward experience, personalization, and digital integration. Physical space alone is no longer enough. And that's the core tension. Dubai Mall was built to dominate through size and spectacle, but the future may belong to flexibility and meaning. And massive structures don't adapt easily. They resist change, which is why the biggest risk isn't sudden collapse. It's slow irrelevance, a gradual decline hidden behind strong numbers, full parking lots, busy corridors, high revenue. But underneath, a system losing its connection with the future. And that's how giants fall. Not with explosions, but with silence. So the real question isn't whether Dubai Mall is still successful. It clearly is. The question is whether it's still evolving. Because in today's world, standing still is the same as moving backward. And history is filled with empires that looked invincible right before they faded. Dubai Mall stands at a crossroads, reinvent itself into something smarter, more sustainable, more human. Or remain what it is and slowly become a relic of a different era, a museum of excess in a world demanding balance. And that decision won't be made by architects or executives. It will be made by the next generation walking through its doors. So what do you think? Is this still the future of retail? Or the beginning of the end for the world's most ambitious shopping experiment? Because sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. And sometimes what looks like a peak is actually the start of a fall.